Picture a freezing harbor in Norway. It is late 1960s.
Right. Pitch black, icy water.
Exactly. And you have these massive, hulking cargo ships pulling away from the docks, and their hulls are just sitting incredibly low and heavy in the water.
Because of what they're carrying.
Yeah. Mountains of gray powder, hundreds of thousands of tons of freshly milled cement, and it's all bound for the Americas and Africa.
Which is a very long, very expensive trip.
It is. And here's the detail that should just honestly make your brain short circuit right from the jump.
Lay it on us.
Every single time one of those ships blasts its horn and leaves that harbor, the company that loaded it is actively, intentionally losing money.
Just burning cash.
Burning it on an industrial scale. They are shipping this low-value, super heavy commodity across the globe at a massive negative profit.
And the executives back in the boardrooms in Oslo.
They are perfectly aware of it. They literally predicted it. And despite that, they are fighting tooth and nail to build even more factories just so they can load more ships and lose even more money.
It genuinely defies, every basic assumption we have about how capitalism is supposed to work.
Right.
You look at that scene and you think you are witnessing just absolute corporate madness.
Total detachment from reality.
Yeah, but what if I told you that this self-destructive, bleeding enterprise was actually the result of a perfectly rational mathematical response to a single, seemingly fair rule?
That is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are talking directly to you today, whether you are an economics nerd, a business strategist, or really just someone who loves the sheer face-slapping thrill of a historical mystery where human behavior just goes wildly off the rails.
Oh, it goes completely off the rails here.
So off the rails.
Yeah.
So today our mission is to take a microscope to this legendary economic study. It's by Lars-Hendrik Röller and Frode Steen.
Two brilliant economists.
Yes. And they basically performed a forensic autopsy of the Norwegian cement industry from 1955 to 1968.
And the data they uncovered is just staggering.
It is. We are going to show you exactly how a group of the smartest, most powerful industrialists in Europe basically built a machine that forced them to financially cannibalize themselves.
Yeah, and beyond the bizarre mechanics of that money-losing export empire, we also have to look at the climax of this whole story.
The big 1968 twist.
Right, because in 1968, the government steps in and allows this supposedly heroic corporate mega merger to save these companies from themselves.
Supposedly heroic being the operative word there.
Exactly. We are going to unpack the hidden math that proves this so-called rescue mission was actually one of the most staggering multi-million kroner heists ever pulled on a nation's unsuspecting public.
I am telling you right now, the numbers in the study are absolutely wild. The economists had to pull off this incredible piece of academic magic to find the truth hidden in these secret ledgers.
Like a financial detective story.
It really is. By the time we finish unpacking this, you're going to look at every efficiency merger and corporate subsidy in the news today with just deep, deep suspicion.
As you should.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to set the board first. In this decades-long monopoly game, who was actually pulling the strings of an entire nation's infrastructure?
Right, to get there, we really need to rewind the clock way back to 1923.
Okay, take us back.
So we have to start with the shadow puppet masters. In the early 1920s, cement was the undisputed lifeblood of national development. I mean, Norway is a country of mountains, fjords, brutal weather.
You can't just build out of wood and expect it to last.
No, absolutely not. If you want to build roads that survive the winter, if you want to build hydroelectric dams to power all your new industries, you need concrete.
And concrete means cement.
Exactly. So the companies that control the cement, they basically control the physical future of the entire country.
And there weren't many of them, right? The market was essentially dominated by three absolute titans.
Right. So first you had the pioneer, Christiania Portland Cement Fabric, which we will just call CPC for short.
CPC, got it.
They had been around since 1892, situated down south near the capital. Then, during the boom times around World War I, two major challengers emerged.
Okay.
You had Dalen Portland Cement Fabric, or DPC, founded in 1916, and then way up in the rugged north, you had Nordland Portland Cement Fabric, or NPC, in 1918.
So you have these three regional kings, basically, north, south, and central.
Yeah. But then the roaring 20s hit a massive wall in Norway.
Right. There's this severe post-war economic slump.
Suddenly the building just stops, the orders dry up, but those massive factories are still there.
And the historical data from the study shows that by the early 20s, the physical capacity of these three companies to produce cement was almost double what the country was actually buying.
Right, and what happens in a free market when supply is double the demand?
The price totally collapses.
Completely. The three companies engaged in this brutal cutthroat price war. I mean, they were slashing prices, bleeding their own margins dry just to keep their kilns running.
Which is great for the consumer in the short term, but terrible for them.
Exactly. It was totally unsustainable for the businesses. So in 1923, they basically looked at each other and realized, why are we destroying our own wealth?
Right.
They said, let's just stop competing.
Which is wild, because if companies try this today, executives go straight to federal prison.
Oh, absolutely. But this is 1923 Norway. There are really no robust antitrust laws.
So they just do it out in the open.
They literally form a legal, formalized cartel. They sign an agreement and create a joint central sales office called A.S. Portland Cement Counter.
Okay, so a single office.
Yes. From 1923 onwards, if you were a contractor in Oslo, you couldn't just call up CPC and ask for a bulk discount. You couldn't pit DPC against NPC to get a better price.
You had no leverage.
None. You had to go to this single, unified office.
Right.
They controlled all domestic sales. They dictated the price.
What's really fascinating here is the sheer audacity of it, the institutional power of this arrangement.
It wasn't a secret at all.
Right. Today, the word cartel conjures up images of secret offshore bank accounts, encrypted messaging apps, shady backroom deals.
Yeah, exactly.
But in mid-century Norway, this cartel operated in the broad daylight of polite society. I mean, by 1927, they realized that just fixing prices wasn't enough.
They needed to control the entire ecosystem.
Yes. So they founded the Norsk Cement Forning, or NC.
And this wasn't just some harmless marketing board. This was a full-on empire-building apparatus.
The study points out that the NC was funded directly by a tax on every single bag of cement sold.
Wow.
And they used that money to lobby the government, to dictate national engineering standards for concrete. And this is the part that genuinely shocked me. They actively embedded themselves in the universities.
Oh, yeah. They were directly participating in the education of civil engineers.
It is a brilliant, if, slightly chilling strategy. Because if you teach the engineers how to design buildings using your specific proprietary standards,
You guarantee a market for your product for generations.
Exactly. And they went even further down the supply chain. They created a collaboration body for the local independent concrete mixers.
The guy's actually pouring the stuff?
Right. The cartel's own secretariat literally shared office space with the institute representing the local mixers.
Talk about a conflict of interest.
I mean, they were making sure that from the university chalkboard to the local construction site, everyone was playing exactly by the cartel's rules.
They built an inescapable fortress.
They really did. They threw all their freshly produced cement into a giant metaphorical vault, locked the door, and put one guy at the window to sell it to the entire country at whatever inflated price they wanted.
Fat, happy, and totally unchallenged at home.
But here is the massive, glaring contradiction that kicks off this whole mystery for the economists.
Right, the data from the 50s.
Yeah, look at the numbers from 1955 to 1968. If you charted this out, the domestic consumption of cement in Norway, the actual amount used to build things inside the country, it goes up by a very reasonable 50%.
Normal growth.
Normal growth, but the export volume, the amount of cement they are frantically shipping out of the country, it skyrockets by 150%.
Which makes no sense.
Why? I mean, if you have a perfect monopoly, your entire goal is to restrict supply to keep prices artificially high. You don't massively overproduce.
It seems completely irrational. It is the exact opposite of what a textbook monopoly should do.
So how do we explain it?
To understand this weird, massive spike in production, we have to open up the black box of the cartel and look at how they decided to divide the spoils.
Okay.
We have to look at the sharing rule.
Right, the seemingly fair profit-sharing agreement that basically drags every single member into a financial abyss. How does that happen?
Well, it really comes down to human nature and poorly designed incentives.
As always.
Right. The central sales office is making an absolute fortune selling cement at high monopoly prices inside Norway. But CPC, DPC, and MPC are still three distinct, independent corporate entities.
They aren't one company yet.
Exactly. They have their own shareholders, their own CEOs, their own bottom lines. They need a mathematical formula to determine who gets what percentage of that sweet domestic revenue.
Right. And, common sense would tell you to just look at historical sales.
Right, the easy way.
Yeah, just say, hey, CPC, you've always supplied 40% of the market, so you get 40% of the profits. DPC, you get 40%.
Right.
NPC, you get 20%. You lock those percentages in, and everyone goes to play golf.
But they didn't do that.
Why not?
Whether because of ego or maybe a desire to accommodate future growth, they chose a rule that tied their market share directly to their physical capability to produce.
Okay.
So the sharing rule was this. Your designated share of the highly lucrative domestic market is exactly equal to your share of the cartel's total production capacity.
Wait, let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. Let's use a non-cement analogy because the mechanics here are crucial for the listener to grasp.
Go for it.
Let's say it's a group of fishermen who agree to share a single, incredibly lucrative but very small pond.
Okay, nice and simple.
They want to avoid overfishing, so they all agree we will only pull out 100 fish a day total. But how do they divide the 100 fish?
Right, who gets what?
They make a rule. Whoever owns the biggest boat gets the largest percentage of the 100 fish.
That is a perfect analogy. So think about what happens next.
Well, if I'm a fisherman and I want 50 of those fish instead of 20, I don't need to become a better fisherman.
No?
I don't need better bait. I just need to go into debt, buy a massive ocean liner-sized commercial trawler, and drop it into this tiny pond.
Exactly.
My boat is huge, so my percentage of the catch goes up. But the pond still only yields 100 fish total.
Precisely. And what do the other fishermen do when they see you show up with a massive ocean liner?
They panic.
Absolutely.
Because if my percentage goes up, mathematically, theirs has to go down. So they run to the bank, they take out huge loans, and they buy their own massive ocean liners just to defend the share they already had.
You've just perfectly described the unrestricted arms race that tore the Norwegian cement cartel apart from the inside.
It's just a totally fatal flaw.
It is. The Common Sales Office rigidly restricted the total volume of cement sold domestically. But, and this is the huge glaring loophole, the cartel agreement placed absolutely zero restrictions on how big a factory a member company could build.
Wow. So if I'm the CEO of DPC and I want more of that high-margin domestic cash, I just call my engineers and say, build another kiln.
Build it as fast as you can.
Even if the entire country of Norway doesn't need a single extra ounce of cement, the very existence of my new kiln increases my percentage of the total national capacity.
Which means the central office is mathematically forced to give you a bigger slice of the domestic pie.
And remember the technological context of the 1950s and 60s. Cement manufacturing technology was experiencing this massive, massive leap.
Right. We are moving from older vertical kilns that produce maybe 50,000 tons a year to these colossal technologically advanced rotary kilns.
It's absolute monsters.
Massive steel tubes lined with fire bricks, hundreds of meters long, spinning slowly at thousands of degrees, pumping out 500,000 tons of cement a year.
And they are incredibly expensive to build.
But because of this sharing rule, the three companies start aggressively building these giant machines anyway.
They are trapped in a cycle of mutually assured destruction. Everyone is borrowing massive amounts of capital, building these gargantuan factories, entirely disconnected from what the market actually needs, solely to steal domestic quota from each other.
Yeah. But here's the physical reality of the situation that creates the real crisis.
Yeah.
A rotary kiln only works efficiently if you run it constantly.
You can't just turn it on and off like a light switch.
No, absolutely not. It takes days to heat up. You can't just run it for an hour a day to hit your small domestic quota. It's churning out hundreds of thousands of tons of gray powder constantly.
Yeah. Where does it all go?
Well, it can't go into the domestic market.
Right. The sales office won't allow it. That would crash the high monopoly prices.
So it gets dumped on the export market.
And the sheer scale of this waste is just staggering when you look at the paper. By 1968, Norway exported 828,000 tons of cement.
It's a massive number.
Let's put that in perspective for you listening. 828,000 tons. That export number alone is almost equal to the entire domestic production of the whole country just 13 years earlier in 1955.
They were basically producing an entire nation's worth of excess cement purely as a byproduct of a bad math formula.
And the internal mechanics of how they handled this excess powder are almost comical.
The horse trading.
Yes. Because the cartel demanded absolute mathematical adherence to the sharing rule, the companies were constantly shuffling this excess cement around.
Right. So say DPC has really good deep water port facilities for loading ships, but CPC doesn't.
Okay.
CPC wants to sell its full quota domestically because it's highly profitable. So CPC would sell extra cement inside Norway, and in exchange, CBC would literally pay DPC to take CPC's excess cement and export it for them.
Just to make sure the accounting balanced perfectly at the end of the month.
Exactly. It was an administrative nightmare.
But hold on, I need to stop you there because this is where my skepticism alarm goes off, and I bet anyone with a business background listening is thinking the same thing.
Okay, what is it?
Let's talk about the physical logistics of shipping cement. It is one of the worst things in the world to transport.
It's heavy, it's messy.
It is incredibly heavy. It is highly prone to moisture damage. If it gets wet, it's ruined. And its value per ton is incredibly low.
Right.
And the world market price for cement in the 1960s was dirt cheap. So every time they loaded one of those ships to send this excess capacity away, they had to be paying exorbitant freight costs.
Absolutely.
So were they actually losing money on every shipment?
Yes. The study mathematically proves they were exporting this cement heavily below their marginal cost.
Wow.
For every additional ton they produced and pushed onto a boat, they were actively losing money compared to if they had just shut the machine off.
It was a negative profit dumping scheme.
That's exactly what it was.
Okay, but if I am a shark-like industrialist, I don't voluntarily burn money unless I have a strategic reason. Was it the geography? Why were they shipping it all the way to the Americas and Africa?
Right, that's a long way to go.
Sweden and Germany are right next door. Why not just dump it over the border and save on shipping?
Because of the threat of retaliation.
Okay, explain that.
Cement operates in what economists call a multi-market game. The European landscape was full of other national cartels. Swedish cartels, German cartels.
Oh, I see.
If the Norwegian cartels started aggressively dumping their cheap excess cement into the Swedish or German markets, those cartels wouldn't just sit there.
They would fight back.
They would immediately retaliate by dumping their own excess capacity into Norway.
And that would destroy the high domestic prices the Norwegians were fighting so hard to protect.
Precisely. It was a geographic Mexican standoff. So they had to load it onto these ships and send it to non-European markets, Africa, North America, South America, where the threat of retaliation was virtually zero.
Okay, but still, the freight costs to Africa, that must have been agonizing for the accountants.
It was, though they did actually have one quirky logistical advantage that kept them afloat a little longer.
What was that?
During this period, Norway's economy was heavily reliant on importing dense bulk materials.
Oh.
For example, their aluminum industry required massive imports of bauxite from Latin America.
Okay.
So you had these colossal cargo ships arriving in Norwegian ports fully loaded with bauxite. But when they emptied the bauxite, they needed ballast to sit low enough in the water to safely sail back across the Atlantic.
So the Norwegian cement companies basically went down to the docks and said, hey, instead of filling your hull with seawater for the return trip, fill it with our useless cement.
Exactly. The outbound Norwegian ships had massive excess capacity for bulk transport. This allowed the cement cartel to negotiate significantly lower outbound freight rates.
That's actually pretty clever.
It is. But, and this is vital to understand, even with this massive, massive discount on shipping, the world price for cement was so low that it still didn't cover the baseline cost of producing it.
They were still bleeding cash.
Still bleeding cash on every single boat.
Which brings me to the two big hypotheses I would be testing if I were an investigator looking at this.
Okay, what's your first theory?
Number one, did they just screw up the math?
The oops factor.
Yeah. Did they build all these colossal rotary kilns in the 1950s because they genuinely truly believed Norway was about to undergo some massive building boom that would require 1 million extra tons of cement, and then the boom just never materialized?
Like a bad forecast.
Exactly. We see this in real estate all the time, right? Wild optimism leading to overbuilding, and then ghost cities.
It's a perfectly logical hypothesis, the oops, we miscalculated theory. Röller and Steen looked directly at this, and the historical data absolutely destroys this idea.
Really?
Yeah. They found an incredibly detailed internal 10-year forecast that CPC produced in 1957.
Okay, how detailed are we talking?
Astonishingly detailed. CPC didn't just guess. They built a comprehensive model factoring in national fertility rates, household sizes, the average number of rooms per new house, macroeconomic GNP growth.
They really did their homework?
They left nothing to chance.
Okay, so what did their crystal ball say?
In 1957, CPC predicted that a decade later, in 1967, the total Norwegian domestic consumption of cement would be 1.35 million tons.
Okay. And what was the actual realized consumption when 1967 finally rolled around?
1.358 million tons.
Wow, wait, they missed by less than 1%?
Less than 1%.
That is terrifyingly accurate.
Right. It completely shatters the illusion of incompetence. They weren't stupid. They weren't blinded by optimism.
They knew exactly what was coming.
In 1957, they knew exactly how much cement the country would need for the next decade. They knew exactly how much excess capacity they were building.
They knew they were making millions of tons of garbage they couldn't sell at home, and they did it anyway.
Exactly.
So hypothesis 2 then. If they weren't stupid, they must have been tactical.
The strategic moat theory.
Right. Was this an entry deterrence strategy? Like, we know we are overproducing, but we want to build so many massive, terrifying factories that no foreign competitor will ever dare try to enter the Norwegian market.
Like, don't even try to mess with us.
Yeah, like if a British company tries to sell cement in Oslo, we will just flood the market with our massive reserves and bankrupt them instantly.
Again, it's a classic economic theory. It makes sense on paper. But the comparative data says no.
Oh, so?
Because if this massive overcapacity was a standard, rational defense strategy for a European cement cartel, you would expect to see the exact same behavior in other European countries that had similar cartels.
Right. The Swedes and the Germans would be doing it too to protect their borders.
Exactly. But when the researchers actually charted the export data of other European nations during this exact same time frame, those lines are relatively flat.
No huge spikes.
They fluctuate slightly, but they are totally stable. Then you look at Norway's export line, and it looks like a rocket taking off into the stratosphere.
Ah.
This insane capacity explosion wasn't a standard strategic defense. It was a uniquely Norwegian disease.
Caused entirely by the poison pill of their specific sharing rule.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is what game theorists and economists call a semi-collusion trap.
Semi-collusion.
It is the ultimate real-world manifestation of the prisoner's dilemma.
Okay, let's break down the psychology of that trap for the listener, because it's so central to why they couldn't stop.
Imagine you are the CEO of CPC. You are sitting in the boardroom. You know that if all three companies agree right now to stop building new kilns, you will all remain insanely rich.
Just harvest the domestic profits forever.
You will just harvest the monopoly profits in the domestic market forever? That would be full collusion, colluding on price and capacity.
But they couldn't do that.
No, because they only had a semi-collusion agreement. They colluded perfectly on the price, but acted as mortal, cutthroat enemies on capacity investment.
Right.
Because you, the CEO of CPC, look across the table and think, I want to stop building. But I can't trust the CEO of DPC.
Paranoia sets in.
If I stop building and he secretly starts pouring concrete for a new mega kiln tomorrow, his percentage of the national capacity goes up.
And by the math of the sharing rule, your share of the domestic market gets slashed.
I lose my profits.
So you think, I cannot let him get the jump on me.
Exactly. The first one to cheat the gentleman's agreement gets the biggest slice of the pie. Knowing this, nobody trusts anybody.
So everyone aggressively builds at the exact same time.
Knowing full well it will lead to disastrous export losses simply because the alternative, losing your domestic market share, is worse.
They are completely trapped in a cage of their own design. They are perfectly aware they are bleeding out on the docks, but they are unable to stop themselves because of the brutal game theory mechanics of their own rule.
It is a Greek tragedy written in gray powder.
It really is. But hold on, I need to push back on the core premise of this whole study right here.
Okay, pushback.
How did the economists actually prove they were losing money? Because cartels, by definition, do not publish their true internal cost data. They don't take out ads in the Sunday paper saying, hey, it costs us exactly $8 to make a ton of cement.
No, they hide that data at all costs.
Right. You have hit on the exact reason why this study is so famous. Traditional economic analysis usually just throws its hands up in the air at this point.
It hits a brick wall.
Exactly. If you are an antitrust investigator or an economist and the cartel refuses to hand over their internal ledgers, how do you prove they are dumping below cost?
You can't.
If you don't know what it costs to make the cement, you can't prove they are losing money on the boats. If I'm the cartel lawyer, I just smile and say, prove it. Prove we aren't just highly efficient.
Right.
So how do you find hidden costs when the companies are doing everything in their power to hide the truth? Did they wait for a whistleblower? Did they find a box of old tax returns?
No. They didn't need a whistleblower.
Mm-hmm.
This brings us to a piece of sheer academic brilliance by Röller and Steen.
Okay, I love a good academic magic trick.
They used what is called a structural model.
Yeah.
They realized they didn't actually need to break into the cartel's archives to find the marginal cost.
They didn't need the ledgers.
No. They could reverse engineer the cartel's exact internal costs by analyzing the cartel's public behavior on the world market.
Okay, we are going to take this slow because I want you listening to solve this puzzle with us. How do you reverse engineer a secret number using only public behavior?
Okay, let's put you in the shoes of the manager of that central sales office.
The AS Portland cement contour.
Right. It's a Monday morning. You have a massive mountain of cement produced by your 3 rival members over the weekend.
Okay, looking at my mountain.
You have to make a daily decision. How much of this mountain do I allow to be sold inside Norway today? And how much do I force onto a boat to Africa?
Well, my goal is to maximize total revenue for the cartel.
Exactly. So first, you look at the world market. The world market price for cement is what economists call exogenous.
Meaning outside our control.
Right. Norway's production, even at its absolute highest, is just a drop in the bucket globally. Nothing you do can change the world price. You are a price taker. Let's pretend the going global rate is exactly $10 a ton. If you put a ton on a boat, you get exactly $10. No more, no less.
Okay, so my baseline alternative is always $10. That is my opportunity cost. Every ton I sell in Norway is a ton I could have gotten $10 for in Africa.
Keep that number in your head. Now look at the domestic market. Inside Norway, you are a monopoly. You control the entire supply curve.
Right.
The less you sell, the higher the price you can charge. The more you flood the domestic market, the lower the price drops.
Basic supply and demand.
Right. So you start selling your mountain into the domestic market. The first few tons go to desperate buyers who will pay a massive premium, let's say $50 a ton.
Huge profit.
The next batch goes for $40. Still great. But as you sell more and more into the domestic market, the price you can command drops.
Because I'm fulfilling all the high-end demand, and now I'm just trying to convince everyday people to build extra patios they don't really need.
Exactly. The extra money you make from selling one additional unit is called your marginal revenue.
Okay, marginal revenue.
Now, as the manager, when do you stop selling cement into the domestic market and start loading the boats?
Well, if I'm watching the domestic price drop, $30, $20, $15, I would stop exactly when the domestic marginal revenue hits $10.
Why?
Because if I sell one more ton domestically, the marginal revenue might drop to $9. And I'd be an absolute idiot to sell a ton in Norway for $9 when I have a guaranteed boat waiting to give me $10.
Boom. You just solved the first half of the puzzle.
Wow, okay.
The cartel's optimal strategy, and we can assume these businessmen acted optimally to maximize revenue, is to equalize their domestic marginal revenue with the world market price. The world price anchors their domestic behavior.
Okay, that makes total sense. But wait, how does that tell us what it actually costs to make the cement in the first place? We still don't know the manufacturing cost.
Here's the second half of the puzzle, and this is where the specific insanity of the sharing rule comes in.
Right, the capacity rule.
In a normal monopoly, a company will only build enough factory capacity to produce the exact amount of cement they want to sell. Their capacity is intimately linked to the domestic demand.
But we already established that the Norwegian cartel members were not normal.
Right.
They were building capacity like maniacs just to steal quota from each other, completely ignoring domestic demand. The fishermen buying ocean liners for a tiny pond.
Exactly. Their decision to build a new factory was completely disconnected from the domestic consumer. They were building capacity based purely on the incentive to export and steal quota.
Okay, so how do we math that out?
The economists set up an equation. They know the mathematical formula of the sharing rule. They have the public data on the world market price of $10.
Right.
And they know the firms are pushing capacity until the benefit of stealing quota exactly matches the cost of building the factory.
Oh, I see it. Because the domestic market is basically isolated by that $10 floor, the economists can strip the messy domestic demand curve completely out of the equation.
Exactly. By looking at the equilibrium condition, where the firm's ruthless drive to build capacity and export just balances out their internal pain of adding that capacity, the economists could mathematically isolate the marginal cost of production.
That is wild.
They looked at the outward behavior, the frantic building, and the massive exporting at a known world price, and traced the math backward to find the hidden internal cost.
That is genuinely incredible. They basically weaponized the cartel's own greed. They used the cartel's mathematical drive to overproduce, to calculate their exact financial pain.
It's beautiful economics.
It's like guessing a neighbor's exact grocery bill, not by looking at their receipts, but by calculating the exact volume and weight of the luxury food wrappers they throw into the trash every week.
That is a very visceral way to put it, yes.
And here's the thing about economists.
What's that?
They love a beautiful mathematical model, but a model is just a theory until you prove it in the real world.
Very true.
Röller and Steen didn't just publish their theory and call it a day, right? They went looking for proof.
They needed to check their math against reality.
Yes, and years later, they achieved the impossible.
They got the books.
They got access to the actual historical accounting data. They went to the Norwegian Industry Statistics Archives.
The Holy Grail.
They found the real ground truth secret ledgers for what CPC, DPC, and NPC actually paid for wages, electricity, and raw materials every single year from 1955 to 1968.
They finally had the actual receipts.
So they did a consistency check. They took their mathematically reverse-engineered marginal costs, the numbers they basically pulled out of thin air using just public export behavior, and plotted them on a graph.
Okay.
Then they took the actual real-world input prices for electricity and fuel from the secret ledgers and plotted those on the exact same graph.
And what did the graph look like? Did the lines match?
Match is an understatement. The lines moved almost perfectly in tandem.
Wow.
The correlation coefficient between their inferred theoretical measure of marginal cost and the actual physical electricity and fuel costs was a staggering 0.93.
That is incredibly high.
The correlation with the wage data was 0.89. They even compared their derived marginal cost to a broader short-run average unit cost index, and the correlation was 0.96.
A 0.96 correlation, for anyone listening who isn't a statistician, a 0.96 in real-world economic data is basically identical.
It's essentially a mirror image.
It means the model wasn't just close, it was practically clairvoyant.
It wasn't just an academic flex. It was ironclad, inescapable proof. The elegant mathematics and the grubby secret accounting books both screamed the exact same truth.
Which is?
That this cartel was heavily inefficient, it was overproducing wildly beyond any rational measure, and it was bleeding out massive amounts of cash on the global market. They completely laid bare the inner workings of this secretive organization.
Okay, so we have established beyond a shadow of a doubt that these corporate titans were trapped in a self-destructive death spiral of their own making.
Absolutely.
But this raises a huge flashing neon question.
Lay it on me.
If the companies are spending an absolute fortune on useless, massive factories, and they are losing millions dumping cement onto boats to Africa, who's actually paying for all this inefficiency?
Right.
My instinct, and I think the instinct of anyone listening, is that the consumer always pays. Corporate losses usually equal higher prices for the little guy.
That's the conventional wisdom.
But here comes the biggest, most counterintuitive plot twist of the deep dive. The data shows that this evil, highly inefficient cartel actually ended up giving Norwegian consumers surprisingly cheap cement.
Wait, really?
Yes.
How on earth is that possible? That makes no sense.
It is a fantastic paradox, and it highlights why studying market mechanics is so important.
Yeah.
The irony is profound. The worse the cartel was at managing its own internal capacity, the better it was for the average Norwegian citizen trying to build a house or pave a road.
Okay, you have to explain the mechanism there, because it sounds like magic. How does corporate waste lead to a discount?
Let's go back to our manager at the Common Sales Office making his Monday morning decision. Remember his golden rule. To maximize total profits, he has to match the domestic marginal revenue to the world market price.
Right. The $10 anchor. If the world price is $10, he sells domestically until the domestic value drops to $10.
Now look at the historical timeline. During the 1950s and 60s, the global market price for cement was generally quite low, and occasionally it dipped even further.
Okay.
What happens to our manager's math if the world market price drops from $10 to, say, $8?
Well, his opportunity cost drops. It's now less lucrative to put it on a boat.
Right.
So to balance his equation, to bring the domestic marginal revenue down to match the new $8 world price, he is mathematically forced to take cement off the boats and allocate more cement to the domestic market.
And what does basic supply and demand dictate?
Yeah.
If you are suddenly forced to flood the domestic market with more supply to balance your equation,
The domestic price has to drop.
Yes.
You have to lower the price to convince consumers to buy that extra volume.
Precisely. Because the cartel had so much excess capacity from their internal arms race, They were deeply tethered to the fluctuations of the low world market price.
They had a mountain of cement they had to get rid of.
Exactly. If they had been a true, perfect monopoly one that wasn't trapped in a bizarre internal quota war, they never would have built all those extra factories in the first place.
Right, they would have just built exactly what Norway needed, restricted the supply tightly, ignored the world market entirely, and gouged the Norwegian consumer with astronomically high prices. This is a massive aha moment. The sheer, staggering inefficiency of the sharing rule accidentally created a massive discount for the public.
Wild, right.
The cartel was so busy fighting itself, spending all its energy and capital building useless kilns to steal fractions of a percent from each other, that the structural math of their own agreement forced them to give Norwegian builders a break.
It is the ultimate irony of the semi-collusion trap. The researchers explicitly note this in the study. The ineffectiveness of the cartel led directly to higher domestic consumer surplus.
The everyday citizens of Norway were actually benefiting, completely by accident, from the cartel's internal dysfunction.
But, just visualizing those charts, the export line rocketing straight up. It couldn't last forever.
No, you can't just keep buying ocean liners for a tiny pond forever.
By 1968, the export losses had reached a critical physical limit. They were exporting over 800,000 tons at a severe loss.
They are building bigger and bigger kilns just to tread water. The math is eventually going to crush them.
Cash flow was drying up. The internal bleeding was becoming fatal. And importantly, there was a ticking clock on the wall.
A deadline.
Yes. Back in 1962, realizing they needed some structure, the three firms had signed what they called the 7-year agreement.
Okay, what was that?
This was a comprehensive pact that bound them together in all sorts of logistical ways. They agreed on common packaging standards. They standardized the chemical types of cement they would produce. They even shared purchasing for certain raw materials.
He's just standardizing the industry.
Right. And this foundational agreement was set to expire on December 31st, 1968.
Okay, let's set the scene here. It is 1968. The game is up.
Time's up.
The companies are utterly exhausted from this bizarre, decades-long arms race. They are hemorrhaging cash on the docks every time a ship leaves. Their grand structural agreement is about to expire, meaning the whole system might collapse into pure chaos.
The executives are staring into the abyss.
What do?
They do what any exhausted cartel does when the infighting becomes too painful and costly.
They surrender.
No, they decide to stop fighting entirely. They team up and form an unstoppable supervillain.
Oh, wow. In 1968, the three giant CPC in the south, DTC, and NPC in the north merge.
They combine it all.
They combine all their assets, all their factories, and all their power into a single, massive, unified corporate empire called Norsum.
And you can just imagine the PR spin.
I can practically see the newspaper headlines now. The government, the business press, the public.
Yeah.
They all cheer this as a heroic act.
They frame it as a necessary rescue mission, saving a struggling, vital national industry from terrible inefficiency.
And if you just look at the surface-level mechanics, the press releases make sense, right?
They do. The merger acts like a magic wand. It eliminates the internal arms race overnight.
Right, because if CPC, DPC, and NPC are all the same company now, there are no more internal quotas to fight over.
There's no sharing rule to manipulate.
Norsum doesn't need to build a useless kiln in the north just to steal market share from a kiln in the south, because Norsum owns both kilns.
Exactly. And most importantly, the merger instantly stops the bleeding on the docks.
How so?
Norsum is no longer forced by a quota math formula to produce excess cement. They can immediately rationalize production.
So they just turn off the bad machines?
Right. They can look at their portfolio, permanently shut down the oldest, least efficient kilns, run the best kilns at optimal capacity, and produce exactly what the Norwegian domestic market needs.
No more dumping perfectly good cement in Africa at a massive financial loss.
Exactly. It sounds incredibly rational. It sounds exactly like what a CEO is supposed to do.
So let me ask the million-kroner question. Was it actually a heroic act? Did the creation of the Norsum monopoly save the day for Norway?
If you look at it through a very narrow, restricted lens, yes.
Okay.
If the only two options in the universe are the old, bleeding, dysfunctional cartel versus the new, streamlined monopoly, the merger was a success. The researchers ran the welfare calculations.
Okay, let's define welfare really quickly for the listener, just so we know what we are measuring.
Good idea. In economics, total welfare is basically the sum of two things.
Okay.
First, producer surplus, which is just the profit the companies make. Second, consumer surplus, which is the benefit consumers get when they buy something for less than the maximum price they were willing to pay. Total welfare is the overall health and wealth of the market.
Perfect. So what did the welfare math say about the Norsom merger?
The data shows that moving from the dysfunctional cartel to the streamlined monopoly created a positive welfare gain for the Norwegian economy of about 11.13 million kroner in the year 1968 alone.
11.13 million kroner in 1968 money. That's a solid, tangible win.
It stopped the ridiculous waste of resources.
Looking at that number, it looks like the perfect, rational decision. It looks like the government acted like a benevolent dictator, stepping in to fix a broken, bleeding market and saving 11 million kroner in the process.
But that 11 million kroner figure is a massive illusion.
An illusion.
It is a total trick of perspective. And this is where the sheer genius of the researchers' economic welfare analysis really hits home. They asked a devastating counterfactual question.
What was the question?
What if those weren't the only two options? What if the choice facing the Norwegian government in 1968 wasn't just let them be a dysfunctional cartel versus let them be a perfect monopoly?
Right. What if there was a door number 3? What if the government had stepped in, blocked the mega merger, and instead forced CPC, DPC, and NPC to genuinely compete against each other in a free market?
Exactly. Economists call this alternative Corno competition.
Corno competition. Okay, let's break down Corno competition because this is the key to the whole heist. How does it work?
Let's compare it to what we know. In a monopoly, one company dictates the total quantity and the price.
Easy enough.
In perfect competition, hundreds of tiny companies fight until the price drops exactly to the cost of production.
Okay.
Corno competition is in the middle. It happens when you have a small number of big players, like our 3 cement giants.
Okay, so how do they act?
In Corno competition, the firms do not collude. They don't talk to each other. They don't share a central sales office.
No secret meetings in the back room?
None. Instead, each firm independently decides how much cement they're going to produce, knowing that the other guys are also deciding how much to produce, and knowing that the total amount of cement they all dump onto the market will determine the final price.
Oh, I see. It's like a massive game of chicken. If I'm CPC and I produce a ton of cement, I might capture a lot of the market, but I'll also drive the overall price down for everyone, including myself.
Exactly. So you have to find the perfect balance. It forces firms to be highly efficient, and it naturally drives prices down closer to the actual cost of production, which massively benefits the consumer.
So the researchers built a model for this?
Yes. They ran the historical data through their equations to see what the Norwegian economy would have looked like in 1968 if the authorities had smashed the cartel, burned the sharing rule, and forced the 3 companies into true Corno competition.
I am bracing myself. What were the numbers?
The numbers are staggering. If the government had forced true Corno competition, it would have generated a societal welfare boom of 130.55 million kroner in 1968.
Wait, pause. Say that again.
130.55 million kroner.
Compared to the 11 million kroner they got from the merger.
Yes. The Norsom merger yielded 11.13 million. Free market competition would have yielded 130.55 million.
That is insane.
By allowing the monopoly to form, the government and the regulators effectively took roughly 120 million kroner of potential wealth and threw it straight into the garbage.
120 million kroner in 1968. Think about the physical reality of that money. That is new hospitals. That is newly paved roads for remote villages. That is cheaper housing for thousands of families post-war. And it was just vaporized.
The researchers described the merger as a distant second-best solution.
Distant is right.
The government chose it because they were entirely focused on the visible problem, the ships bleeding money on the docks. They wanted to stop the visible export losses.
Right. Fix the thing right in front of your face.
But in doing so, they completely ignore the invisible massive gains that a structurally competitive free market would have provided.
It's like praising a mechanic for fixing a leaky tire by setting your entire car on fire.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sure, you can technically say, well, the tire isn't leaking air anymore, but the patient, the consumer, is massively fundamentally worse off than if the mechanic had just patched the tire.
In this case, patching the tire means enforcing free market competition.
That is a brutally accurate way to put it. You cured the symptom but killed the patient's potential. And the ultimate tragedy of this story is identifying exactly who paid for that 120 million kroner bonfire.
Because someone always pays.
Yes. The people who suffered the most from this heroic corporate merger were the exact same people who had been accidentally benefiting for years.
The consumers. the ordinary Norwegian citizens.
Let's break down this double plundering, because this is where the math translates into real human impact. In this grand capital restructuring, how exactly were ordinary citizens robbed not once, but twice?
Let's look at the first plundering. We have to look at what the Nordstrom merger immediately destroyed.
Okay.
Remember that accidental inefficiency discount the consumers were enjoying, the one caused by the cartel's internal warfare forcing them to dump excess cement domestically.
Right, because they were tied to the low world price, supply was high, so domestic prices were accidentally low.
Well, the moment Nordstrom was formed, that internal warfare vanished. Nordstrom had zero incentive to overproduce.
Because they had no one to fight.
Exactly. They weren't tied to the world market price anymore because they weren't forced to export. They could finally do what a monopoly is supposed to do: restrict domestic supply and optimize for a true, plenishingly high monopoly price.
Oh, wow.
Overnight, that inefficiency discount vanished. Cement became much more expensive. The researchers calculate that consumers lost 36.76 million kroner in existing welfare just from the price correcting upwards to monopoly levels.
So that is the first plundering. The cartel finally gets its act together, they stop fighting, and the immediate result is that the consumer's bill goes up by almost 37 million kroner.
That is money pulled directly out of the pockets of home builders.
But the second plundering is the invisible one, right? And
No.
it is vastly larger.
It is the theft of potential. It's the difference between the monopoly price they were forced to pay and the competitive price they should have paid.
If they had door number 3.
Yes. If the government had instituted true corno competition instead of allowing the Nordstrom merger, the three companies would have been fighting for customers and prices would have plummeted.
How much did that cost them?
The researchers calculate that under competition, consumers would have gained 237.35 million kroner in benefits.
237 million kroner?
Gone.
That is nearly 250 million kroner in consumer wealth, completely erased. They were robbed of the future they should have had. The Nordstrom monopoly basically extracted massive unearned rents from the public.
They absolutely did.
And this begs the ultimate question. I mean, if you are listening to this right now, you have to be screaming at your device. Why did the government allow this to happen?
This is a fair question.
Where were the regulators? Where was the antitrust department banging on the doors of the boardroom to stop this mega merger?
They essentially didn't exist.
What?
The failure here isn't just corporate greed. It is a story of total catastrophic policy short-sightedness. You have to understand the political and economic climate of Norway in 1968.
Set the stage for me.
They had virtually zero effective anti-monopoly or merger control laws on the books.
How is that possible? They had a whole government apparatus.
They did. But the prevailing industrial policy of the era, and this wasn't just in Norway, it was common across Europe, was a blind, almost religious worship of efficiency and economies of scale.
The idea that bigger is always better.
Exactly. We need national champions to compete on the global stage.
Right.
The government bureaucrats looked at the cement industry, saw the export losses, and said this industry is sick, it's fragmented. We need a massive unified corporation to stabilize it and eliminate waste.
But they had some laws, didn't they?
They had an old trust law from 1926 and a price law from 1953, but historically, the Norwegian authorities, like the Price Directorate or the Price Directorate, were remarkably friendly to cartels.
Friendly to cartels? That sounds like an oxymoron for a regulator.
It does today.
Yeah.
But back then, stability was prized over competition. Get this. A 1932 extension to the Norwegian price law actually outlawed excessively low prices.
You are kidding.
No. The government intervened to stop price wars just to protect industry profitability. The interests of the consumer, the idea that cheaper is better for the public, were practically irrelevant to the policymakers.
That is genuinely maddening. The authorities basically looked at a cartel that had inflicted a massive financial wound on itself through its own stupid sharing rule, and instead of punishing them, the government handed them the keys to the entire country's infrastructure.
They rewarded bad behavior.
They allowed the cartel to solve its own self-inflicted wound by making the public foot the bill for their decades of financial mismanagement.
The merger was celebrated in the press because the absolute best choice, smashing the monopoly, trusting in free market competition, prioritizing the consumer, wasn't even on the government's radar.
Just a total blind spot.
It was a blind spot in their economic philosophy. It wasn't until the late 1980s, decades later, that Norway actually introduced modern, robust merger control laws.
But in 1968, they just let the fox not only guard the henhouse, but legally purchase the farm, lock the gates, and dictate the price of eggs to the entire country.
That's a pretty good way to sum it up.
Let's recalibrate here because the journey we just took is incredible, and I want to make sure we lock in the big picture for you listening.
Let's review the tape.
We started in the 1920s with three massive companies deciding they were tired of the hard work of competing. They collude. They build a giant centralized sales office to control the country.
Step 1.
Right. Then, to divide the profits, they create a sharing rule based on capacity. But that rule contains a fatal flaw. It accidentally incentivizes them to build massive, useless factories.
Step 2.
This triggers a decades-long arms race, forcing them to dump millions of tons of cement into Africa and the Americas at a massive, verifiable loss, all to steal tiny fractions of the domestic market from each other.
A textbook semi-collusion trap. A prisoner's dilemma that their own internal documents prove they accurately forecast, yet they were completely unable to stop because of the game theory mechanics of their own agreement.
Right. And while they're bleeding out on the docks, the sheer mathematical inefficiency of their system accidentally gives the Norwegian people a massive discount on cheap cement.
The irony of it all.
Then, when the financial pain becomes unbearable in 1968, they pull off their greatest trick. They convince a compliant, scale-worshipping government to let them merge into one giant monopoly.
The escape hatch.
This rescue mission wipes out the consumer discount overnight and steals hundreds of millions of kroner in potential competitive benefits from the public. It is an absolute masterpiece of a corporate heist, dressed up in the respectable suit of an industrial efficiency maneuver.
And the most beautiful part of this study is that this entire heist was completely invisible to the public eye until economists Röller and Steen came along decades later.
They cracked the code.
They reverse-engineered the truth from the global market prices, built a mathematical model of the cartel's hidden pain, and then matched it perfectly with the secret ledgers. It is forensic economics at its absolute finest.
But, as we wrap this up, we can't just leave this as a dusty history lesson about mid-century Norwegian infrastructure.
No, it's far too relevant today.
Think about the world you and I are living in right now. When we look at today's global landscape, what do we see?
A lot of the same patterns.
We see massive state subsidies propping up favored industries. We see the insane involution and massive overcapacity in the new energy sector, where companies are building factories they don't need just to capture government grants.
Yep.
We see tech giants burning billions of dollars in negative profit models, subsidizing ride-sharing or AI development, just to trap market share and choke out rivals.
It's the same playbook.
Are we just watching the Norwegian cement cartel of 1968 play out all over again, just with different products?
The parallels are striking. The product might change from heavy gray cement to electric vehicles or solar panels or software apps, but the underlying mechanics of human incentive remain exactly the same.
It's all about the rules of the game.
Exactly. Unreasonable rules, whether they are private cartel agreements, poorly designed government subsidies, or venture capital mandates to grow at all costs, they always force capital into crazy self-destructive corners.
And when it finally blows up,
history shows us time and time again, when the music finally stops and the corporations merge or consolidate to stop their own bleeding, it's rarely the executives who pay the price. It's usually the public left holding the bill.
So here is my final thought for you to take away from this deep dive. The next time you are scrolling through the news and you see a headline praising a heroic corporate merger that's going to save a struggling industry and increase efficiency, I want you to pause.
Take a breath.
I want you to ask yourself, what is the hidden cost? Who is actually benefiting from this efficiency? Because being truly well-informed means looking past the PR press releases.
You have to look at the numbers.
Sometimes it means checking the math on who exactly is paying to fix the broken tire and who is quietly setting the car on fire.
It is a vital reminder that a system that looks completely broken and irrational from the outside might actually be operating perfectly according to its own internal warped logic. You just have to find the hidden rule.
Why would a group of highly successful companies deliberately choose to bleed money, desperately shipping their product across the ocean at a massive loss year after year with a smile on their faces?
Because the rules of the game told them to.
Keep questioning the rules of the game around you. Until next time, thanks for taking the deep dive.